Living in a condo complex can be interesting, but I never expected it to turn into such a wild ride. Our building has 10 units, and I live on the first floor with my 2 cats, Pearl and Shadow. Life was pretty peaceful until about a month ago when the unit above mine went up for sale. The sale happened quickly, and before we knew it, there was a new resident. I didn't think much of it until I walked out one morning to get my mail and found a note taped to my door. At first, I thought it was just a friendly, "Hey, I'm new here" introduction. Boy, was I wrong. The note read, "To all residents, as your new building owner, I'm writing to establish some ground rules. Everyone must be in their units by 10 p.m. If you plan to stay out later, find alternative accommodation. No pets are allowed. If you have any, they must be removed before my first inspection, or animal control will be called. Monthly inspections will be mandatory, and you must be present or face eviction. Late rent payments will result in immediate eviction. Follow these rules and we'll get along fine. Regards, Ms. Thompson." I started panicking when I read the no pets rule. For a moment, I forgot that I actually owned my unit. You see, we'd bought it from a friend who was selling just 6 months ago. After renting it for years, sometimes it still feels strange to remember it's actually ours now. Despite being someone who usually avoids confrontation, I found myself marching upstairs. The moment the door opened, I knew I was dealing with trouble. Ms. Thompson stood there in designer clothes, perfect makeup, and those incredibly long artificial nails that made me wonder how she managed basic tasks. Before I could properly explain myself, she started talking over me about how her rules were simple enough for a child to understand, and that if I didn't like them, I could submit my notice to vacate. The condescending tone in her voice made my blood boil. I tried explaining that I own my unit, and that she had only purchased her individual unit, not the entire building. She didn't take this well. Her voice rose to a screech as she insisted she owned everything and could evict anyone who didn't comply with her rules. Just as I was starting to doubt myself, Mr. Chun from Unit 4 opened his door. He works night shifts and asked what all the shouting was about. When I explained the situation, he looked at Ms. Thompson and said something I'll never forget. "Are you actually serious right now?" Turns out, Mr. Chun was on our building's management committee, and he laid out exactly how wrong she was about everything. The look on her face was priceless as he explained that each unit was individually owned and that she had absolutely no authority over anyone else in the building. She slammed her door so hard I thought the hinges would break. I thanked Mr. Chun, who just shook his head and muttered something about never seeing someone so entitled in all his years living here. I thought that would be the end of it. Looking back now, I realized that was just the beginning. If only I had known what was coming next with the parking space drama. The parking situation in our building is pretty straightforward. Each unit gets one assigned spot, plus there's a single visitor space that's rarely used. My partner usually parks his car on the street, since we're the only unit with 2 vehicles. The other residents had actually told us we could use the visitor spot, but we never bothered since street parking was plentiful. One morning, while I was at work, my partner sent me a series of texts about a commotion in the parking lot. Ms. Thompson was having a full-blown argument with Mr. Evans from Unit 6 about parking spaces. Apparently, she had decided that since she owned 2 cars, she was entitled to his parking spot. "Move your vehicle immediately," she demanded, "or I'll have it towed." Mr. Evans, who's usually quiet and keeps to himself, stood his ground and calmly repeated that it was his designated spot. He even told her she could either use the visitor spot or park on the street like everyone else. When she threatened to tow his car, he simply replied that he'd report it as theft. My partner, worried she might try to claim our spot next, moved his car into my space while I was at work. According to his texts, she stormed back to her unit, slamming doors as usual. When I got home that evening, I found her second car parked in the visitor spot, but she'd managed to position it in a way that partially blocked the driveway. I was too exhausted to deal with it and just parked on the street. However, someone else in the building clearly had enough of her antics because the next day, her car was towed. My partner said he heard her screaming about it, but nobody admitted to making the call. Just when we thought things might calm down, the laundry incident happened. Living in a climate where it rains frequently means you have to take advantage of sunny days for drying laundry. We have 2 shared clotheslines in our common area that everyone uses without any issues, until Ms. Thompson moved in, of course. After a week of rain, I rushed home from work one Saturday when the sun finally came out. I did 5 loads of laundry, sheets, blankets, towels, everything that had been piling up. The clotheslines had plenty of space, so I hung everything out to dry and went inside to relax. An hour later, I went to check if anything was dry enough to bring in. What I found made my blood pressure skyrocket. Every single item I'd hung out was thrown on the ground, getting dirty and wet again. Even my laundry basket and clothespins were gone. I marched upstairs and knocked on her door. When she answered, she had this smug look on her face as she informed me that I hadn't asked her permission to use her clothesline, and that maybe next time if you ask nicely, I'll let you use it. Now I deal with difficult customers daily at my retail job. I know how to keep my cool. I'd tried to be diplomatic about the parking situation and her ridiculous rules. But this time she'd crossed a line. My bed is my sanctuary, and those were my clean sheets lying in the dirt just because she wanted to flex some imaginary authority. I took a deep breath and calmly explained that the clotheslines were communal property. When she tried interrupting me, I held up my hand and told her straight, "I'm on the building committee, I know all the rules, and you need to stop this childish behavior because it's not doing you any favors." The door slam that followed was so loud it probably registered on the Richter scale. For a few weeks after that, things were relatively quiet. Her cars stayed in appropriate spots, one in her space and one on the street. No more laundry disappeared, and no new rules appeared on anyone's door. We thought maybe she'd finally understood how things worked around here. Then came the barbecue incident. My unit has a sliding glass door that opens onto a small patio area leading to the shared yard. I rarely use it except for ventilation or hanging laundry. One afternoon, we heard people setting up furniture in the yard. No big deal, it's shared space after all. But then came a knock on our sliding door. There stood Ms. Thompson, informing us we needed to move our potted plants because she needed our patio space for her barbecue. My partner politely reminded her that the patio was our private space, not communal. One of her guests called out that they'd already set up the grill in the shared yard, which made her storm off in a huff. We thought that was the end of it, but a few hours later, one of her party guests knocked, asking to use our bathroom because Ms. Thompson told her to just use the downstairs unit instead of going upstairs to her place. When my partner declined, the guest apologized and left. Minutes later, Ms. Thompson was back, pounding on our door and screaming about how we needed to keep our door open for her guests to use our bathroom. That's when my usually calm partner lost it. He told her to leave us alone and threatened to call the police for harassment if she knocked again. One of her friends actually pulled her away and apologized to us. Surprisingly, the party ended around 1 a.m., earlier than we expected. The next morning, we found our potted plants knocked over. What Ms. Thompson didn't know was that we hadn't planted anything yet. Those pots were filled with used cat litter. The sweet smell of karma, quite literally. Just when we thought the drama was over, she spotted our cats through the sliding door one day while I was airing out the apartment. I dozed off on the couch when I heard rattling. She was trying to force open our locked screen door, yelling about how she had the right to show them real love and that I was abusing them by not letting people pet them whenever they wanted. That was the last straw. We installed security cameras after that incident. But karma wasn't finished with her yet. Her nephew showed up one day to house sit because she'd broken her foot tripping over a dog at a family dinner. He actually apologized for her behavior, admitting she might be a bit crazy. We thought we'd finally get some peace while she recovered at her family's place, but she came back a few weeks later. When she found out I had tested positive for that virus we all know about, she had another meltdown, demanding I leave the building immediately. I was tempted to open the door and share my germs, but I'm not that petty. The latest episode involved a package delivery. Our building has an unofficial system. Neighbors sign for each other's packages when someone's not home. While my elderly neighbor was away, a package arrived for me. Ms. Thompson decided to help by taking it in, but somehow it accidentally got opened. Let's just say the contents sent her into another screaming fit about how I was perverted and needed to move out. I reminded her that opening someone else's mail is actually illegal, while my private purchases are perfectly legal. She threw the package at me and stormed off. These days, we're all wondering what her next performance will be. At least it's never boring around here anymore, though I'd happily trade some excitement for peace and quiet. My partner says we should write a book about all this, but honestly, who would believe these stories? Sometimes I have trouble believing them myself, and I lived through them. I guess some people just can't handle the concept that the world doesn't revolve around them. At least we've all gotten pretty good at handling her outbursts, and the security cameras are getting plenty of use. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, Please hit that subscribe button to help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.